Hi, I'm Sam from Oxygen Tech, and today we're going to talk about Boolean operators and control flow using branches in Dart.
So to begin today, I've just opened dartpad.dev. So if you navigate here, this should be the screen that you see. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you get a better view. And if you don't see this, you can click New, Dart Snippet, and this is what it'll generate. So we're going to get rid of this for loop. So we've just got void main and then open curly brackets. So as we know, the main function is where the program starts. So today we're going to, first we might have a quick recap over what I've talked about before. So variables, which is a reference to a piece of data. So for example, a string is a data type. So variables and data types are what we've gone over before. Data types we went over were string, integer, double, and Boolean. Get rid of that indentation. And we know that integer and double fall under the category of number. So if we want to declare a variable, we can say string name equals sim. And then we can reuse that later. Int age equals 30. Double height equals 1.86. And Boolean is hungry equals true. So these are just some basic variables and data types we've learned. And in my last video, we looked at some operators that you use on those data types, except for Booleans. So today, I want to have a look at Boolean operators. And then after that, we'll quickly list the Boolean operators, and then we're going to implement them using branches. So the branches we'll be looking at today will be if statements and switch statements. And these help the control the flow of the application. So first, Boolean operators, let's just list a few. So the first one is equals equals. So this is determined whether one variable is equal to another. So if we say, I'm just going to use a print statement as an example here. So if we say 1 is equal to 2, it should print out false, as we know that 1 is not equal to 2. So just look over this side of the screen and it should come up with false once it's finished running. There we go, false. So that is equal to. So if we say 1 is equal to 1, we should get the opposite result. And we have true come up over here. Okay, and the next one is exclamation point equals. So this means not equal. So when you see an exclamation point in programming, that means not. So if I say print 2 is not equal to 2, and we run, we'll have this line printed first, which is, as we know, true, and then this will be false. Because if we say 2 is not equal to 2, that's a double negative, it means it's false. So if we said 2 is not equal to 1, just get rid of this so we only print the 1 value. 2 is not equal to 1, and this should bring us back true. True, there we go. Alright, so next we're going to have greater than and less than, and we may as well also say greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. Okay, so let's try to use these. So 2 is greater than 1. We should get this is true. Similarly, if it's greater than or equal to 1, it should be true. And if we say 1 is greater than or equal to 1, this should also be true. However, if we just say 1 is greater than 1, it should return false. False. There we go. Okay, and then less than, so 1 is less than 2, should be true. And less than or equal to 2 should also be true. Okay, I think we understand that. Moving on. So now it gets a little bit more interesting. We have two and symbols. So this means and. So if we say, for example, print true and true, it should be true, because if something is true and it's also true, it should be true. But if we say true and false, something cannot be true and false at the same time. So this should return false. False. And then the last one we're going to look at today, actually the second last, this means or. So I'm just going to put in here and or. So if we change this to true or false, so we've got an error down here saying this is dead code because it's always going to be true. True. And if we have true or true, it will also be true. But if we say false or false, false. Okay, so this will make a bit more sense when we look at the branches here, so don't stress too much about that yet. And the last one is just the exclamation point, which we know means not. So if we say something is true, not, something is not true, see what this returns. False. And if it's not false, it should be true. I'm just going to list these here. Is equal to, is not equal to, is greater than, is less than, is greater than or equal to, and is less than or equal to. Okay, so they're the basic Boolean operators that you need to be aware of. So now we're going to move on to branches. So we're going to start with if statements, which you may or may not have seen before. Anatomy of an if statement is you write if, and then in parentheses, whatever statement you're testing. So if this statement is true, so I'm just going to write true in for now. And then within the curly brackets is the action you take. So print, this is true. And then we can write else. So if it's not true, this is what happens. This is false. So that's the basic anatomy. So let's say, let's create a variable. Bull is hungry. All right, we haven't given it a value yet. So let's say is hungry is true initially. So it's going to write is hungry here. And if is hungry is true, we'll say Sam is hungry. And then, or else we'll say Sam is not hungry. Okay. So we've got an error here saying it's dead code since we've already assigned this to true. So this is just for demonstrative purposes. So in a program, you'd be gaining input from the user and this would change variables. So here I've assigned the variable as true, so it will always be true. That's why we're getting this error. So this is just for an example. Later we might use the random library to have something a bit more interesting to work with. So let's run that. So we know that is hungry has been assigned true. So it should print Sam is hungry, which it has. Okay. Now, let's use a different example. So int, let's just make up a random number equals, let's say 4 initially. If random number is greater than 5, let's say here, number is greater than 5. And then another thing, rather than just having else here, we can have more than 2 scenarios. So that's why I've changed it to an integer rather than a Boolean. A Boolean can have 2 values, true or false. Here we're going to use an example that can have more than 2. So you can write else if. So when you write else if, you need to open parentheses again and give the condition. So let's say random number is greater than or equal to 3 and random number is also less than or equal to 5. So if that's the case, we're going to print number is between 3 and 5, and then after the curly bracket here we can write else again. Else print number is less than 3. And we don't need to state else if number is less than 3, because we know if it's not greater than 5 and it's not greater than or equal to 3, it's going to be less than 3. So the random number we've assigned here is 4. So it will check if it's greater than 5, it'll say no. I'm going to move to the next level and it says else if random number is greater than or equal to 3, which is true, and it's less than or equal to 5, which is also true. So it prints number is between 3 and 5. So as another example, let's put in 2. Again, it will go through and check, okay, 2 is not greater than 5, so we'll move to the next level. It's not greater than or equal to 3, so we can skip this because both of these, so this and this both have to be true when we're using and. So one of them is false, so we don't need to check the other one. And then moving on, if these are not true, then we move on to the final else section and print number is less than 3. So number is less than 3. So that is basically how if statements work. There is, and here there's no limit in how many else if parts you can add. So if you wanted to, you could say add this else if whatever the condition is you want, and you can just keep going, which can get messy, but it's something that can be used. So let's do a shorter version of this. So say random number. So this is called a conditional expression. So what we've been using is a conditional statement, and a conditional expression is a shorthand version for it. So let's say a random number is greater than 5. Print greater than 5. Else print less than or equal to 5. So this is just a shorthand version. Rather than writing out the whole statement, this is an expression. So here we write the expression that we're testing. So we're asking, is a random number greater than 5? And then we put a question mark. And if this is true, we return greater than 5. And then we use a colon for the else section, and we print it's less than 5 if this statement is false. So that's just a shorthand version. You don't necessarily need it, but sometimes if you've got something that's going to fit into a line of code, it's a bit easier to do that than writing out a whole statement. So those are if statements, and switch statements we've used before. So let's just have an example again. So we're going to use the random number variable that we've assigned here again. So switch, random number is what we're assessing. oops, random number. So case 0, print the number is 0. Oops. Case 1, print the number is 1. And then you can also put in a default case where we print the number is neither 0 or 1. So again, it'll take the random number, it'll say, okay, is this a 0? No, we'll move on. And then to the next case, is it a 1? No, we'll move on. And then the default is what happens if it's not either of those two cases. So it'll print out the number is neither 0 or 1. So let's now create a little program. I think we'll do a dice rolling program that we can try to work it so we use both switch statements and if statements. Okay, so now we've quickly gone over branches for if statements and switch statements, and we've quickly gone through the Boolean operators. Let's create a little program. So I'm just going to get rid of this. I'll keep the Boolean operators up the top as a reference. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the random library. So import dart math, so that we can use random. All right, so first thing we'll do in the program, so the program will look for the main function. It'll say, okay, we're going to start here. We're going to assign a variable, so int random number equals random dot next integer, and we're going to give it, it'll be between, so if we have 6 here, it'll generate a number between 0 and 5. So I want it to be like a normal dice, so let's say +1, so the number will be between 1 and 6. So 1 to 6, so it'll be like rolling a dice, it'll be a random number. Okay, so let's declare a variable called dice results. So let's just call it dice roll. So we could just assign it the random number right here, but I want to try to use a switch statement and an if statement in the same program, which in the same file, I guess, is uncommon, or in the same function, I should say. But we're going to use it this way. So first we're going to use a switch statement. So switch random. So we're going to use the random, oops, not random result, random number. We're going to use the value that the random library has generated in the switch statement, and that is going to assign dice roll whatever its value will be. So in the case where it is 1, we'll say dice roll equals 1. In the case where it's 2, dice roll equals 2. And rather than typing all this out, just going to copy and paste it a couple of times and change the numbers. So 3, 4, 5. So this isn't very exciting. 5, 6. And we should always add the default just in case an error occurs, and I'm just going to say dice roll equals 0, print an error occurred. Oops. Okay, so from here we're going to print dice roll. So I've used our switch statement to assign the value to dice roll, which is a roundabout way to do it, but it's just demonstrating how a switch statement works. So ideally, obviously, we'd just say dice roll equals random number, and you wouldn't need this whole switch statement. But we're just trying to learn here, so we'll do it this way. So let's print this, and it should return a random number between 1 and 6. So we'll generate the random number, then we declare the dice roll variable, and then the switch statement takes the random number, and depending on what number it returns, it will assign the dice roll that number. So we've got a 3 here. Let's run it again. So we shouldn't see any number outside of 1 and 6 if we've done this correctly. So 2, okay. Now, we're going to use an if statement. So let's say the game is, you have 2 players, one chooses even numbers, one chooses odd numbers, so it's nice and fair. You roll the dice. If it's even, you win. If it's odd, you lose. So let's just write a quick if statement to handle that. So if dice roll. So this is a good way to test if a number is an even number. So the modulus is an operator that can be used on numbers. So for example, if dice roll was a 6, modulus would divide it by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and there is no remainder. So it would return 0. So it would say, yes, this is equal to 0. But say you had 5 divided by 2. So 2 goes nicely into 4, but not 5. So you could say, all right, 2 goes into 4 twice, and there would be a remainder of 1. So dice roll, 5 modulo 2 would equal 1. So if it is divisible by 2, you can say dice roll modulo 2 is equal to 0. And that will say, okay, yes, this is an even number, if that is true. So if that's the case, let's print you win. Okay. And just for argument's sake, let's include another else if statement. Dice roll modulo 2 is not equal to 0. So here we could have just put an else statement, because it's either going to be even or odd either way. It can't be somewhere in between, but we're going to do this just to use the else if part. We're going to say print you lose. Else print there was a miscalculation. Oops, calculation. Okay, so it should really never get to this point, because it's either going to be even or it's not going to be even. Okay, so let's run the program. So we're still going to print what the dice roll number is, and then it will print whether we win, lose, or somehow if there was a miscalculation. All right, let's run. The dice is being rolled and we get a 4, so we win. Because it tested this. Yes, it's even. 4 is an even number, so we win. Let's see if we can try to get a loss. Here we go. 1 is an odd number, so it is not equal to 0, not an even number, so you lose. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to speak about today. Just some Boolean operators and switch statements and if statements. In my next video, I think I'm going to have a look at lists. So it's a data type that can store a collection of values, and with that we can do some more interesting things. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.